This is the Visions and Tones podcast with Dr. T.
Welcome to the latest entry of the Visions and Tones podcast. I am back again with another incredible scholar. He doesn't really look like an old person to me. He definitely isn't. I can assure you he's a young person. His name is Saifullah Omar Nasif. He'll help me sort of pronounce that accurately in case I'm butchering his name. But Nasif works on nanotechnology. He's an environmental remediation. Also, he works on controlled release. He's a doctoral research at the University of Newcastle in Australia, and he's also part of the Hunter Community Alliance, which we'll talk just briefly about that. But one thing which is not on the bio that I have is that he's also the president of the Bangladeshi Student Association, which is basically based in the University of Newcastle in Australia. Nasif, welcome to the Visions and Tones.
Thank you so much, Tony, for introducing me so nicely. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. Hope for a good discussion today.
Definitely. I'm excited to be chatting with you. I see you use mostly Nasif. What is your surname? Is it Nasif or what?
My name is Saifullah Omar Nasif. Surname, you can call me Nasif. Well, Saifullah is a good name. It comes from an Arabic root that means sword of Allah. You know, like we call as a Muslim the God as Allah, and that means the sword of Allah. Back in my country, my parents or my grandparents kept this name as part of religious views.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, and the Nasif word means storm or storm. I mean, kind of cyclone.
All right.
Yeah.
So mostly we say Nasif, but you're saying Nasif. What's the pronunciation?
Nasif.
So there's no difference between Nasif and Nasif.
I don't think so. Yeah, it's kind of similar.
Okay. Because I know that in most of the by cultural, I basically mean non-English names.
Yeah.
Sometimes the intonations can actually change the meaning of a name.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I was hearing saying Nasif, and I was like, I'm always saying Nasif, so I'm not sure whether am I calling it accurately or not.
Even I don't know. Like, I got a new insights from you.
Oh yeah.
Let me check it out.
Yeah, it definitely does. You don't want people to say Nasif, hence they're talking about something completely different. Hence the actual pronunciation is
That's a nice
Nasif.
point,
Yeah, but it's nice talking to you. You seem like a busy man. You just came from the lab. You're talking about going back again to the lab.
Yeah.
What are you currently working on? What are you doing now?
As you know, like I'm doing my PhD on environmental remediation at the Global Center for Environmental Remediation in the University of Newcastle. I started my PhD on 2022. That's an interesting thing. Like I got a scholarship to start my PhD on 2020. Back in Bangladesh, I was there, but that time the COVID-19 came and the Australian government posed the travel ban. Yeah. And I couldn't come for 2 years. Finally, I came here 2022, started my PhD, and almost I'm on my third year of my PhD. So at this stage, I'm finishing my research experiments. What I am working on is basically based on the pesticides to formulate some new formulation of pesticides to slow release the pesticides. We can briefly discuss later on this aspect, but in brief, I'm working on the nanopesticides to save our environment, to protect our environment from degrading compared to the conventional pesticide application.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're speaking mostly about nanotechnology. What is nanotechnology?
Well, nanotechnology is kind of newer frontier technologies in the current era. Richard Feynman was the person who coined this term, and in his conference of American Physical Society, he termed this technology and said that if we cut an object into a nanoscale that is 1 to 100 nanometer, I mean, if you divide a 1 meter scale in a billionth division, in a billion part, that one part of that billion part is 1 nanometer. So in the nanoscale, the objects got very high surface area and got very distinct properties that can be used for environmental applications, for medicals. And utilizing these nanoscales and their properties, we can formulate nanopesticides, nanofertilizer, and many more applications. So in brief, there's like what we see in the naked eye in a meter scale. If you just cut into it around billion times, that 1 billionth of that meter, it should be a nanometer, and I'm working on that.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it sounds very broad, like academic jargon.
Yeah.
If you were to speak to me as a fifth grader, what would you say that is in a practical terms? I know that sometimes, we likely able to think in terms of, as an insider, right? I'm more from sociology, and what you're speaking almost sounds agricultural science to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes even as a sociologist, if I have to explain what my PhD was about to certain people, I'm kind of like thinking, oh my goodness, how do I break this in a way that it's easily understandable? Probably to somebody from agricultural science, the way you explained it now, people would sort of understand what exactly that is. But in a layman's language, really, what is nanotechnology?
To be honest, it is the tiny particle, a tiny technology of tiny particles. Those tiny particles can help you to reduce some of the problems that the bigger particles cannot do.
Oh.
For example, there is a door of 1 feet, okay? The dimension of the door is 1 feet, and you want to get entry another object of 5 feet. Can you make it possible to get into this door? Not possible, right?
Not possible.
But if you have, if you can cut the object into 5 times, and you can hold the objects into the door, right?
Yeah.
That's the main basic things. Like what object we see in our surroundings, for example, the chemicals, they usually remains in bulk. I mean, in micrometer size or in a larger particles. Okay. So, often those larger particles cannot effectively act. For example, what's the role of pesticide? The role of pesticide is to kill insect pests or pathogens, right?
Yeah.
Or weeds. So those pesticides cannot effectively kill the target organism when they are in bulk, when they are in bigger particle. Okay. So the role of the role of the tiny particles is to work more effectively, that otherwise not possible in case of the bigger particles. For example, the insects have some sort of pores in their body. The bigger particles cannot enter into that pores, whereas the smaller particles, the tiny particles, can easily enter into the pores, get into the body of the insects and kill the insects. I mean, that kills our crops, that harm our crops at the harvest time. So that's the benefit of nanoparticles compared to the bulk, and that I'm working with, like to formulate some nano-sized pesticides to get more action, to get more efficacy from insect pest control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
that makes sense.
You've broken that in a very simplified manner. Now I've got a bit of an understanding of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe
I kept on hearing people saying nanotechnology, and I tried to research what is nanotechnology. It didn't make any particular sense to me.
Yeah.
So you are originally from Bangladesh.
Yeah.
You did your master's in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
What was your master's about, and how does your master's link to what you're doing now?
Okay. Yeah. I did my bachelor in Faculty of Agriculture from one of the oldest agricultural universities in Bangladesh. We call Shere-Bangla Agricultural University. And I completed my master's as well from the same university in 2018. The thesis topic of my master's was the difference between the insect pests attack on transgenic and non-transgenic eggplant. I mean the GMO or non-GMO eggplant. But I was saying, like, GMO is a very controversial, also a very new science, new topic in this sector. I mean, in the agricultural sector. So I was thinking, like, I working with the GMO brinjal. That was a new invention of Bangladesh. I mean, new introduction to Bangladesh. I was thinking, like, scientists were like announcing that those GMO brinjal or eggplant cannot be attacked by particular insect pest that is called brinjal shoot and fruit borer. So I was wondering, okay, let me cultivate those two brinjals. In one hand, we have the GMO, and another hand, we have the non-GMO brinjal. And let's see if they cultivated side by side, what the target insect can do. Is the pest going to attack the non-GMO only, or he can also attack the GMO? That was my question during the masters, and I did the research. Yeah, I saw the similar one, like what scientists were like. They were claiming that GMO cannot be attacked by that particular insect pests, and non-GMO were attacked much by the brinjal shoot and fruit borer. But also, I see a tiny attack, tiny invasion, a tiny incidence of brinjal and shoot borer in GMO crop. I mean, the GMO brinjal. That excited me because there is something happening, like,
Yeah.
between the GMO crop and the target pests.
I'm curious in that. I mean, there's a lot of things you've said. We'll do a little bit of a back step. But before we do that, when you say you were excited to see that here is a GMO getting attacked, hence this much body of work that says GMOs can never be attacked, and you say you're getting excited. I'm trying to figure out whether is the excitement the fact that your study is disproving other scholars or what? Because obviously the attacks of GMO also tend to sort of raise certain flags in terms of food security, which is part of the things that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
But maybe before we unpack the excitement in itself, let's backtrack a little bit. What are GMOs? I think you've sort of taken us already into the
yeah.
But for somebody who doesn't understand what GMOs are, what are GMOs?
Okay, yeah. So GMO stands for genetically modified organism. GMO, it now being transferred to GMO crops, GMO foods. You'll be here from any, like, it's a very contemporary issue, like GMO crop, GMO foods. That is, in a natural setup, like for any kind of crop, any kind of animal, we have a distinct type of genetical setup we inherent from nature, right? So if someone change this genetical makeup or genetical setup that is inherent from nature and edit some part of those setup, we call it genetical editing or genetic modification.
Right.
So if any crops or any food has been influenced by or has been modified by those works, I mean, the genetic setup of those crops or foods has been changed by either modifying or adding or deleting any of the code, DNA code or gene that is the very part of the genetic setup, we call it genetically modified organism.
Right.
So it can be in different ways. One way is to, for example, one of the crop is often attacked by particular disease, particular bacteria or particular fungi, particular organism, pathogen. So if I can identify, well, this gene is responsible for this crop to be attacked by those pathogen, I can delete this gene from that part of the crop. And this gene, these crops cannot be ever attacked by this disease or insect pests.
The removal of the gene that is likely to be attacked, does it affect the nutrition scale that we find on any plants or whatever?
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be. It can affect the nutrition level. It can affect the taste. It can affect the color. It can affect the odor, smell. Like, I don't know, you can remember from your childhood, did you get the same taste of apple or orange that you've been tasted in childhood?
No.
It is due to there are so much hybrid crops. There are so much new varieties that sacrifice the taste, color, the smell. In case of GMO, it can also occur. The nutritional status.
So, but is that always a case of certain genes where omitted,
every
or
gene
it could be an aspect of I've grown old, therefore my taste buds are also improving into certain things, and also the familiarity in terms of how my consciousness can remember.
It's a very nice thing. Very nice thing you just pointed. It may be a reason, but from my scientific point of view, when I do improve any crop, there is something changed. There is something sacrificed to get, just I will focus only for higher yield. I'll just only focus for less attack by insect pest or disease. And to get into those improvement, there are something sacrificed, either taste or either nutritional quality or either the color.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what I was talking, the genetically modified can be of various types, and it can be addition of gene, it can be deletion of gene, it can be transfer of gene. When it is gene transferred, in terms of transfer of gene, you call it transgenic.
Right.
Transgenic. And that brinjal I was working, eggplant I was working, it is called BT brinjal.
Okay.
That's it came from Bacillus thuringiensis bacteria. This bacillus is responsible to kill the insect pests I called, like I told you, brinjal shoot and fruit borer.
Mm-hmm.
When this bacteria get exposed with brinjal shoot and fruit borer, bacteria is kind of very toxic. I mean, the bacteria can secrete some of toxic material that can kill the brinjal shoot and fruit borer. So scientists think that if I transfer this gene from bacteria to the eggplant, then my eggplant will contain this gene that can attack, that can kill the brinjal shoot and fruit borer, the insect, when it get exposed to, or when it will come to eat that brinjal. Okay. So ultimately, we got a transgenic brinjal, another genetic material from a bacteria to my brinjal. So my brinjal contains a part of bacteria, a toxin from bacteria. And when the pests come to attack, it got that gene that will be responsible for its death. And ultimately, it cannot attack more. And ultimately, the loss can be reduced.
Okay.
Because to save that brinjal, farmers usually spray a lot more pesticides to just get rid of that insect. Right. So when the gene the gene is inside the eggplant, the insect cannot attack.
So when you say they spray a lot of pesticides, is it on GMOs or non-GMO?
No, non-GMO.
Non-GMO.
Yeah, because it doesn't contain the gene and the insect can attack.
Right. So the excitement there, I mean, obviously whenever we come across groundbreaking work that sort of either refutes or it's sort of a new invention in terms of our work, what sort of excitement then?
The thing is it was exciting. Even I feel now excited because as the scientists were claiming that there are no attack from insect pests in that GMO brinjal, but I got some. Well, this was not very high amount compared to non-GMO, but GMO was attacked by the target pest, the brinjal shoot and fruit borer.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good finding in a sense that it brings in a new lens through which scientists have to sort of look through without of giving praise to GMOs over non-GMOs, because there's been a whole lot of all that to say, well, GMOs helping us even in terms of food security. They're not susceptible to a lot of pesticide, attacks and so on and so forth. But that's a complete different thing. If your findings come to prove to us to say, hey, there's also something about GMOs that we need to sort of look forward to in terms of the future. I mean, there's too many things right now that is unspoken, unknown in terms of what the GMOs can do in our bodies. Do you want to maybe talk to us a little bit about what is, the perceptions out there of society, what is known and what is not known so far in terms of research?
Well, now come to the controversy of GMO. So basically, from my research, it was an initial stage of research, and I wish I could have been continued in that research, because there are some part GMO, we become antibiotic resistance, like human can become antibiotic resistance, if you like consume much medicine at the one point of your life, that medicine won't work much to get rid of the disease. It may happen in case of GMO. When the bacteria can see, okay, in my current form, I cannot attack that brinjal. So I have to develop resistance. I have to develop a new form of myself to attack the brinjal.
It's more like going to call my cousins and others, being more armed.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. That is we call biotype. Mm-hmm. New biotype can emerge from those effect of GMO. It actually happens in kind of, glyphosate is one kind of herbicide to kill weeds from crops. Glyphosate is a herbicide that can kill any type of weed, any type of plant in the crop field. Okay. So when even you plant some like important crops like soybean or canola, if you spray glyphosate, it will kill everything. It will just vanish. It will just eradicate everything from the field. So scientists notice that if this happens continually, we cannot grow any soybean or canola because weeds are growing, crops are growing. So if I spray glyphosate, it doesn't make sense. So they invent glyphosate-resistant soybean. Okay, my soybean will not be affected by glyphosate application if still there are spray.
Is that soybean GMO?
Yeah,
right.
That's the soybean GMO.
Like,
yeah, that's a GMO soybean. What happened? From that soybean, there was gene transfer from other plants, from other weeds. Okay, and those weeds, those unwanted plants now are resistant to glyphosate. So if you spray more and more, those weeds cannot be killed.
Okay.
So it's created another problem. In my case, it may happen because insect pests may create another biotype, another form, another variation of those species that cannot be even affected by GMO anymore. There's one of the controversies from science vision, like GMO has some limitation.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, like pesticide resistance, if we just set aside the pesticide resistance things, another thing is the health and the environment issues. Well, come in front of in terms of health issues. In India, there are BT cotton. Like I was working with the BT brinjal, but there are also some GMO crops that in India, it was BT cotton. Farmers who are working with BT cotton have found to be affected by severe allergies. Even those who are working in the non-BT, non-GMO cotton, were not affected. And practitioners and doctors were concerned with those farmers who are working on the GMO. So there are maybe some allergenesis, and there are maybe some connection with the gene transfer or with the exposure to the GMO crops to human. This kind of very simple issue, but complex issue may emerge. For example, you are consuming GMO brinjal or GMO anything for a long time. So in some part of life or in some point of life, those genes which were responsible to kill the insect can be, like, I'm asking question to everybody, can it be harmful at some point of life to your stomach or to your alimentary canal or to your blood? I don't know. It's unanswered question still. So scientists are claiming that there are no recent findings of harming health, but the question still remained unanswered that in the long-term exposure, after 20 years or 30 years, we don't know if there will be aftermath of this consumption. There's another issue with GMO crops.
Wow, it's a lot to unpack there. I'm thinking is it reckless, deliberate reckless or indirect reckless to say there isn't any wrong that GMOs can do now to people? Or rather, scientists should come up and say, instead of saying there isn't anything wrong, but they should be clear in their communication, the fact that we haven't got any evidence at this particular moment.
Yeah, the thing is, so far my understanding, based on my understanding, that scientists are working with very integrity and with dedication, because we're in terms of in a verge of food crisis. Our global population is increasing day by day, and we have to feed the global population by the middle of the century, by 2050. If we have to feed that population, we have to increase the global food production by 50%.
As much as that is the case, but there still is a political lens that we cannot overlook. Capitalism is seated in the room, in the boardrooms, as we're talking about food consumption. Because one of the things that GMOs have improved is actually mass production, which actually that also affects the whole conversation about whether one is consuming organic food or one is consuming non-organic food. So obviously with GMOs, mass production, it means, high profits also at the same time is things that are sort of put into context. But how do we make sense of all this then?
Yeah, another question, like another thing just came into my mind that, well, GMO crops are good in terms of production, in terms of saving, in terms of reducing the pesticide application. But my question is, who will produce the seeds of the GMO crops? I mean, is it on the farmer's hand or is it on the hand of some big corporations?
Yes, that's exactly still part of the capitalism conversation, because most countries, especially in the third world, they used to have pride in their crops, used to have pride in, their seeds and whatsoever. Now you hear that, the market in the introduction of GMOs, there's sort of ways in which the seeds died off somewhere else. And you wouldn't know also whether the death of the original seeds in those countries, was it also a matter of sabotage or it was a matter of nature? It isn't really clear at this moment. But now in order for one to get the seeds, you have to go and purchase them elsewhere.
Of course.
And that's giving money to somebody else as opposed to you being able to produce all those seeds and eventually, vegetables or fruits by your own self. So the thing is, I'm just concerned as to how much more, at least you seem to be sort of be cognizant of the fact that part of what you're doing there is the integrity of research and reality of research and great groundbreaking work of research. But at the same time, there is capitalism that is sort of sabotaging us. How do we as young researchers navigate our spaces around those, I mean, in terms of the things that we find? Because for somebody like you, whose master's level proves that, in fact, GMOs can get attacked by pesticides here and there, you are a possible threat to somebody who's making money, who's making profit with GMOs. And that kind of a research, it'll be easy for it to sort of be suppressed, which is why I think perhaps had you pursued it in your PhD, we would have seen even more political insights coming in.
Of course, because that I was saying that, well, if this GMO barrier is broken by an insect pest, they will get another GMO. They will call it GMO better. And after 2 years, they will get another GMO better. And they will get another GMO better. So farmers will be forced to buy the better one, then the better one version. So farmers will be, what I'm called wrapped by some of the big corporation forever. Farmers will not have the choice to buy based on their own choices. So it's a kind of network of global capitalism. Even, I don't know, like some big corporations is handling those things. But one suggestions I can, like, I don't know if I can reach my voice.
I was going to ask you that, to say, well, without running the risk of being called an anti-GMO, but I mean, you possess the knowledge because this is your research area. What kind of suggestions would you sort of provide for people? And not just suggestions in terms of how to preserve the original seed, but also in terms of the packaging of our foods in supermarkets. I think in one of our conversations that you had, you actually asked me whether have I ever come across labels in the supermarkets that specifies this is GMO, this is non-GMO, and of which when it comes to eggs, we do see such things being put out there, like these words, chicken caged or cage-free
free
or
range,
whatever, all those.
Yep, of course. So, like, one thing I got, one suggestion for scientists for big corporation, that is even not my suggestion. One of the environmental activists from USA, he suggested that this GMO research or the GMO products could be license free, should be open source. I mean, no patent could be imposed on those GMOs, so that it cannot be an asset of only for couple of big companies. It can be an open asset. Anybody can research on this GMO. Anybody can release varieties. Of course, in terms of after some regulations. And the regulations should be strict, because in third world countries, that regulation may not be so stricter. And some big corporation use, actually, I would...
Why do you think it might not be stricter in the third world?
Because they got very little pressure from consumers' point of view, even very little room for research, so that they can easily do some trials and get those GMO crops on markets.
Right.
But in developed countries like in Australia, it is kind of not very easy to do research. You have to go through some ethical approval. You have to go through some regulatory approval. Then you can do some research on GMO.
But someone might think that because of all those hoops and hooks that you have to jump with ethics, it seems the first world might be more restrictive into the research compared to the third world. What would you say to that pushback?
Interesting point. Yeah, of course. I think it's good in a sense for, I came from a third world country and I didn't know much about the laboratory health practices, safety concerns, the well-being of myself. So if I jump into a new work, for example, nanotechnology, it can result in a hazard. So it is in a sense okay to have some approval things before you started working.
True.
Yeah. So in case of GMO, it may be another thing. Yeah.
So we were still sort of unpacking the suggestions. Were you done with the suggestions?
Okay, yeah. So my suggestions is number one, based off the environmental activists, to get open license for GMO research, to get no patent world for GMO. Already Syngenta, one of the big corporations worldwide, is working on this one. They already got some license-free open source GMO.
Nice.
So you can work on them. Also, get the public perceptions. I do feel that the controversies around the public or the conflict around the public is based not much with the science, but with what you said, capitalism. People ask, for example, a couple of questions in terms of an interview. They ask that, why do we need GMOs? Are there safer alternatives? As there are some conspiracy theory. That's an interesting thing for conspiracy theories. Some Muslims in Turkey said that, well, this GMO, is it halal or haram? Because it's genes from some other organisms. So I don't know, there are strict regulations in Islam or in other religious.
So what's the response? I'm keen knowing the response to that. Is it halal or haram?
In terms of some Bangladeshi Muslim scholars, it's halal. There are no restrictions, but I don't know much about it. I can dig it more. But there are some conspiracy theories.
But the thing is also that we need to be aware of is the fact that conspiracy doesn't necessarily mean false.
I don't know.
But the thing is, every time when we hear the word conspiracy, we're just quick to associate it with false.
Okay.
But conspiracy, for me as a researcher, it's sort of a nudge to say, here's also another possible angle that you might want to explore to see to what extent does it refute or to what extent does it concur with your overall research. So I'm not sort of pessimistic about conspiracies. In fact, conspiracies excite me because I'm like, actually somebody dared to think about something alternative to what is the popular narrative.
Of course. Of course. We should respect any kind of, point of views. So, So I'm just saying that these are happening worldwide, what people are thinking. So in Europe, in terms of an interview, they were asked that, who will decide the GM crops to be developed and how? Like there are less question with science. There are question with perception. There are question with, capitalism. So like, what are the role of regulatory authorities, and have the regulatory authorities enough sufficient powers to regulate the large companies? Because in some point of the world, it was the three distinct part of the society: government, market, and the community, the society. But now in many parts of the world, the governments and market are blending, merging. So if the regulatory bodies have enough power to regulate the big companies, there's a big question from consumers. So like this big question have to answer in near future if we want to go for more GMO crops. Otherwise, in terms of food, other like part of the things, I'm not very much conscious or very much anxious. But in terms of food that we consume every day, I have to think, because it may harm or may not harm me, but I have to get my answers.
I don't know if in terms of your research, or this might go more into the medical sciences, and I'm keen to sort of see a collaboration between medical sciences and agricultural sciences type of research. So that we're able to sort of get into the answer as to whether part of the GMOs, are they also contributing to the kind of cancerous health, the growth in cancerous health that we're seeing today, because there's no sort of much more accounting to that. Some people do sort of say certain speculations that because some of the foods that we eat, they are sort of injected, and not just only fruits and vegetables, but also animal type. Today a chicken can just lay an egg, and then a chick is out a few weeks down the line. That same chick is at our shelves in the supermarkets. Short space of time. And also with the introduction now of lab-grown meat, which we don't know where that is also going to take us in terms of health. So I'm sort of keen to see in the near future, and it would be great to see also the collaboration between medical researchers and agricultural sciences. So
of course.
All that.
So let me start with some basic things of what is like happening in current world. Like as I told, we have 8 billion of people around. It will be gonna 8 billion people. So there are the big challenges of agriculture at now. One thing is the climate change. The global warming is like exacerbated in this era, and this current time we're suffering from huge fertile land degradation, soil erosion, depletion of water resources, freshwater resources, and of course the sea level rises, salinity, drought, sometimes flood. Like this, all the things, climate issues and the contemporary issues threatening our agriculture. And one of the things that is attacked and like that is affected the crops is the insect pest, disease or weeds. And around 16 to 30% of global crop can be lost due to those attacks from insect pest, disease and pathogens or weeds. Yeah. So what people do, or what farmers do apply a lot more pesticides. Like only 2019, farmers worldwide applied 4.91 million tons of pesticide. And you know what? The maximum, around 90% of those pesticides get lost to the environment through water, air, and soil. And those lost environment is polluting our soil, our air, our water. This pollution is very, very harmful for our environment, for our human health, for animal health, for microbial health. That is we call One Health.
So by pollution, do you mean the 90% of the pesticides that doesn't go into
the target site or target organism?
Right.
Yeah. So those pollution, degrading our ecology, our ecosystems, even the biodiversity. One of the interesting book I can suggest the viewers, the listeners, that written by Rachel Carson. The name of the book was The Silent Spring. The Silent Spring stated that those pesticides were responsible for huge biodiversity loss. The birds lay eggs and the egg shell was not solidified. They cannot transfer to a good shaped egg. The butterflies were lost and even more. So those pesticides nowadays getting more complex disease. For example, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, cancers. Usually in third world countries like Bangladesh, farmers do not wear protective cloths when spraying pesticide. So those pesticides can get into the body, get into the skin of their farmers, and day by day those pesticides get into the inside systems of the body and can create or can deform, can change the genetical makeup, or can degrade the natural system of the inside the body, and it can causes cancer. It usually causing cancers, and the rate of cancers patient, you will see that is increasing. And this is the point where the medical science and the agriculture can tie together and do some collaboration.
So it seems like that kind of diseases, if you're speaking about people spraying pesticides, it's more people who are working in the farms that are susceptible to those direct challenges.
Yes.
And how about the ordinary people then themselves, so they can also see that it is incumbent upon them to make sure that they handle our agriculture, handle our environment.
Of course,
at the same time effectively for the safety, not just only for farmers, but also for the consumers.
Of course. For example, it's a very good point from you. People usually, for example, I have a eggplant crop field, okay? Mm-hmm. So to get rid of the brinjal shoot and fruit borer, I'm just saying again, to get rid of these insect and pest, what people do, farmer will spray at the last moment of the crop being present in the field. And for example, he will sell the eggplants at afternoon. He will apply the pesticide at the morning of the day. That means there are a lot more pesticide in the crop, right? So if that crop goes into consumer's house and this is not cooked properly, or even sometimes after heavy cooking, there may be some residues of pesticide. So it can be in contact with, or in terms of inhalation, exposure to skin. It can be very harmful thing for consumers, from ordinary people who are not very related with the farming practices. So these are the very alarming things we need to address. The way we apply pesticides, the amount of pesticide we apply, the type of pesticide even apply. That's how I'm working with that, the type of pesticide. I'm working for more safer and more effective pesticides that will harm you less but harm the pest more, that will get lost to environment with a very little amount so that the environment can be protected. Yeah.
But also, in addition to what you just said, also the importance of people at homes to sort of know how to clean up their fruits and vegetables before consumption.
Yeah.
Because some would tend to sort of trust the shops that, they've washed this and then they just get an apple from the pack and they start consuming of it without washing it and so on and so forth.
Yeah. In terms of developed countries, it's okay because they have to go through strict regulatory things. They have to test their apples or bananas before coming to the market.
How about those you buy then from farmers in the name of let's support local farmers?
Even the local farmers in good countries, developed countries, they know how to spray pesticide and when to spray pesticide. Even in developing countries like Bangladesh, we also suggest farmers to stop spraying application 7 days earlier before getting to the market. But some are not following those precautions. This is the things of we need to do monitoring, we need to do strict regulation. I'm very much aware of the third world countries because monitoring regulations is not very well established there, and farmers were not very educated this time, and even consumers are not very aware of what we are consuming.
I love how you sort of try to tie for us in a closing part the importance of looking after the environment and the issues of global warming, basically how it sort of ties into our agriculture, not just only in the context of food security, but also in the context of our health and how we have to sort of work together, consumers along with farmers, to sort of make sure we create a safe environment even for us, not just in terms of what we plant, but also in terms of what we consume. So it's more important education even for our health.
Yeah, of course.
What works has sort of been done? Maybe this could be my last or second last. What works should be done to sort of promote that effectively? Because I think the word is there, but it's perhaps not maybe there enough.
Yeah. To me, actually agriculture is a very complex thing. It engages a lot more stakeholders. It engages government. It engages big corporations. It engages international relations. It engages geopolitics, global food supply chain, and of course the gender issues, socioeconomic issues. Actually, a lot more things is connected with this one. So, for example, international trading. For Bangladesh, it is the rice is the staple food for us. So we cannot trade rice. We cannot export rice up to a certain limit because there are some notified crops in Bangladesh. It can create famine if those crops were not available in sufficient amount in Bangladesh at a time. So, of course, to meet up these global challenges, I'll call for consolidated approach, a holistic approach from scientists, from extension specialists, and from the social workers, the activists, to raise their voice in terms of gender, in terms of equity, in terms of indiscrimination, and also in terms of a safer world, because a war in Middle East or in Ukraine can destabilize your food system in Bangladesh. Simple issue in USA. I'm giving an example. In a very remote part of Africa in 2016, there was a invasion of a pathogen for wheat. Okay. Now in 2020, this pathogen in wheat were transferred from any kind of trade, any kind of, from wheat import or export. It came into Bangladesh, and now the wheat industry, the wheat farming is totally shaken by these only tiny pathogens. So these international trades are important in terms of biosecurity and the global food security. So everything, international politics, those tradings, those supply chain issues is very important for not only for those third world countries, for everyone in the world. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Is this a good place to end?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you so much for coming and having a chat with me. I'm definitely going to have you in the very, very near future, because there's other aspects that we couldn't sort of get to crack down. Part of the things that you do, you work with the community, the student association, but also you're part of the hunter community. So very, very soon, I'd love to have you so that we can sort of try to tackle also those that people know you're not only just focused in your scholarship in agricultural science and new technologies, but you're actually, on the groundwork in terms of your community, and you care a lot about your community and, students' affairs, issues of accommodation, and so on and so forth. So in the very near future, I'd love to have you back.
Of course. I'll be more than happy to join.
Yeah, but thank you for really chatting with me.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate, sharing your expertise, and
I'm very happy to join you today, and hope to meet you again.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you.
Definitely. So, listeners of the Visions and Tones, that is Mr. Saifullah Omar Nasif, and he is from Bangladesh. He's doing agricultural science. I'm not sure whether it's actually agricultural science. I just feel like it fits in that scope. So please do follow part of his work, which I'll sort of advertise on the pod page on Instagram, and see also more of his work. He's a very great publishing young scholar, doing great work and contributing in terms of, knowledge production around agriculture and around new technologies in agriculture. Very fascinating work. Thank you for choosing us. Go ye and be best human beings and best versions of yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
This is the Visions and Tones podcast with Dr. T.